In this video, we are going to be talking about the forever beginner curse. And this is something that refers to those of you who have been at it for a few years, sometimes even a decade or two, and you just can't seem to get yourself to graduate up into that intermediate class. This is incredibly common for guitar players who started a little bit later in life or who started young, took some time off, and then now are trying to get back into it. Now, I've worked with and talked to literally thousands of guitar players who have struggled with this problem and found a way to overcome it. So today I want to talk about the best ways to tackle this problem and help you finally break free from the beginner chains. So we're going to start by identifying the things that could be holding you back. And the first one I think is pretty obvious, and that is that you have bad technique habits. If you're spending time practicing with incorrect technique, all you're doing is reinforcing that bad habit and that bad technique. So rather than improving on things like slow chord changes, general sloppiness, or bad strumming and picking technique, you're just gonna be working against yourself and not making any progress. The next one is an important one, and that is having an underdeveloped sense of rhythm. A good sense of rhythm, timing, and feel is such an integral part of this instrument and of getting better at guitar. Guitar is a game of milliseconds and millimeters. It's all about nuance, right? And those tiny little differences of where exactly you place that strum, you place that note, those make a huge difference to what somebody who's listening to you hears. Now, another thing I see holding a lot of guitar players back is inconsistent practice. You can be putting in a ton of hours every month, but if you're just binging and then leaving these big gaps between every binge session, you're not really gonna see a huge improvement. Now, the last thing, and this is personally what I think is the biggest factor when it comes to being stuck as a beginner for a long time, and that is everything you learn is disconnected. Everything you learn just kind of exists on its own little island. And another big component of this disconnect is the disconnect between what your hands are doing and what your ears are hearing. Okay, now let's get into how you can actually go about breaking this forever beginner curse. But before we go any further, I wanna know from you what you think your biggest struggle is and what's holding you back from getting better on the guitar. Take a quick minute to leave that down in the comments below, and I'll be sure to respond to every single one. Okay, so breaking the curse, what can you do? Well, the number one most important thing is to start creating connections. So you've got open chords, you've got bar chords, maybe you've learned a scale or two, maybe you've learned some very basic music theory concepts. How can you start tying that stuff together? For example, let's take the G major chord, right? There's an open chord, an open G major chord. Well, we can also play this chord as a bar chord. It's containing all of the same notes, just slightly different octaves of those notes, because every single major chord, it only has 3 notes and they all just kind of repeat themselves. Well, that chord can also be played along to the G major scale. Sounds like it fits, right? Well, the nature of this chord can actually change depending on the chords that it is being used with and ultimately the key that it is coming from. So in the key of G major, when I play a G major scale, the G major chord acts as our 1 chord or our home chord. Whereas if I were to take a key like C major, which also does contain a G major chord, well, the operation and the way that that chord works all of a sudden becomes very different, even though it's the same chord. Now, if I play G major and I play a C major scale, you can hear that that G major chord still fits, but all of a sudden, because of the context, what it's doing is totally different. This is just one small example of those connections that you want to start making to help deepen your understanding of the guitar. Also, when you make a connection between something you already know and something new that you're learning, it becomes way easier to learn and way easier to remember as well. So there are 2 main ways to make a ton of these connections really, really fast. And the first one is to start learning a little bit of music theory. And I'm not saying go start learning music theory right from the beginning and learn a ton of it. I'm saying a very specific little bit. Like the amount of music theory that you really like, I would consider essential, it can be covered in a 20-minute video, I would say. I actually have a video on it, so you'll see that linked in the description. Just that little bit of music theory applied to the fretboard is gonna go a really, really, really long way in helping you understand music and what exactly is going on here. The other thing is learning how to actually use your ear. It's so common for guitar players in that beginner realm to just have no connection whatsoever to what they're playing and what they're actually hearing while they're playing. In my view, this disconnect between your fingers and your ears is probably the single biggest roadblock to progress that I see with beginners and intermediate players alike. So there's a few ways to start training your ear and working on this skill. A great place to start is just learn how to start finding the keys to songs by ear. I have a great lesson on that. You can check it out in the description. Another incredibly effective way of breaking this curse is to start recording yourself. And I don't mean with a bunch of high-end expensive audio recording equipment. I'm just talking about setting up your phone in front of you, hitting record, playing something, and then watching it back. For most of us, when we watch a video or hear a recording of another guitar player, even if we're novices ourselves, we can tell if that guitar player is good or not. But when we're doing it ourselves, it is very, very hard to tell in real time if what you're playing is even sounding good. As I said earlier, guitar really is a game of milliseconds and millimeters. So it is very, very challenging to recognize these things in the moment. Being able to watch yourself back is gonna allow you to be objective, and it's really easy to actually hone in and identify what is causing you problems. The next thing is building specific techniques. I realize just learning songs, learn one, go to the next, keep going, is really fun, but it's very important to carve out time to work on specific things. These things are right and left hand muting, very important for getting rid of any sloppiness in your guitar playing. Another thing is working on your chord transitions. It's very common for guitar players when they make a chord transition for not all their fingers to go down at once, they go one finger at a time. You really need to learn to put all your fingers down in that chord shape at once. And if you're only practicing your chord transitions going one finger at a time, well, you're just building up that technique and that bad habit, and you're just gonna always default to that. What's better to do is to actually slow down, take your hand off, smack your leg like that, put the entire chord shape down. Even if it takes a long time to get all the fingers down at once, do that over and over with every shape, reset your hand, put the entire chord down, reset your hand, put the entire chord down. If you work on that, yes, it'll be slow at first, eventually you will rebuild those habits, right? And that muscle memory, and instead of going one finger at a time, you're gonna start being able to go from one chord to another, all in one nice smooth motion. Another thing you should be practicing is finger independence. A great way to work on this is just to start working through some scales. A lot of beginners maybe stay away from scales a little bit, start working on some very basic ones. This is gonna kind of help you get independence with each one of your fingers. And then speed. I think it's important to state that you don't want to over or undervalue speed. A lot of people think, well, I'm just gonna sit here with a metronome nonstop, working on this one thing over and over and over and just build up my speed. It's not super, super important, especially at this stage. It's still important. You need some speed, but don't overvalue it. Again, working along to a metronome, working through some scales, or just working on speeding up your chord transitions, that should be your focus. Now, the last three curse breakers, I'm gonna kind of give them to you in a rapid fire succession. The first one is to focus on rhythm and precision over everything else. Next, be consistent with your practice. So rather than just spending 4 or 5 hours over a weekend practicing, try 15, 20, 30 minutes every single day, even less if that's all you have. Practicing the right things for shorter amounts of time every single day is proven to make you better faster. And lastly, if you have the luxury, play with others. A lot of musicians feel like they need to achieve a certain level before they can start collaborating with others, but that's just not the case. The sooner you start, the better. All right, so what's next? I have a video all about what I practice every single day. I think it'd be perfect for you to watch next. So if you want to check it out, I'm gonna put it up in the middle of the screen for you now. Free downloads, my Playing Guitar by Ear course, and my Patreon will all be linked at the top of the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.